What is up, you guys? R.A.Moreno here. This will be my other reaction video. 3 True high school horror stories. High school in itself is a horror story. Tell me about your guys' worst or best experience of high school. I really want to know. Put in the comments below. And I'll put the original link for the video in the description below. I love Mr. Nightmare, man. He's one of my favorite YouTubers. I've listened to him since high school, actually. So, Mr. Nightmare, thank you for putting me through high school. But let's get to it.
I was a senior when this happened. Senioritis had fully kicked in. It was football season. Our high school was always big on football games because our football team was actually good, and there's nothing else to do in our boring country-ass town. One day at school, we were in some joke of an elective. My friend JJ was in this class with me, so we'd always mess around. It was a Friday, and there was a football game later that day, so we planned to go. And JJ, being the sweet talker he's always been, spun his chair around to face these girls Kayla and Ashley and asked them to go to the football game with us. We already knew them well, so it wasn't weird of him to invite them or anything. They seemed down to meet us later, so JJ dropped me off at home after school, and like 4 hours later, he picked me up, and then we picked up Kayla and Ashley. Then we drove to the school back parking lot by the woods. We had some Four Locos in the car, making sure nobody was passing by. Then we poured some more into water bottles to bring to the bleachers with us. We walked over to make sure we got good seats at the top row of the bleachers. Since the game started late, it started getting dark during the third quarter, and by the fourth quarter it was dark. Our team was losing pretty bad for a change this game, so bad even that a lot of the kids in the bleachers were leaving early. We just stayed, planning on hanging out on the field after anyway. The game ended and our team lost really bad, and so the field and bleachers were quiet. People were scurrying off the bleachers. The team rushed back inside the locker room in embarrassment, and the away team slowly made their way back to the buses. Within 10 minutes, we were among the only people left in the bleachers, minus a couple others and maybe a couple people in the field. We were honestly drunk by this point, and the team's defeat wasn't ruining our fun. When the field lights turned off, it was basically pitch black here minus the moonlight. Everyone was gone. We went to go lay in the field. JJ ran to his car to get more alcohol. By now, it was probably 10 o'clock. JJ said let's go in the woods next to the football field. The girls of course were scared, and that's why the idea seemed fun. When they wouldn't budge, we both got up and ran towards the woods, leaving them alone in the dark, knowing they'd get scared and follow us, which they did. We crawled under the little ripped chunk of fence that kids would use to get into the woods, and then started walking down the little hill into the woods. The girls were very reluctant to follow, but they did. We ran ahead to lose them and hide just to mess with them. As soon as they heard us running, they both yelled to stop. They tried to keep up, but we lost them and hid behind a couple trees. We hid and laughed for a few seconds. Then JJ patted me and told me to look in that direction. And though it was dark, we could see, perhaps only because of the moonlight barely finding its way through the trees, a towering black figure, maybe 15 feet away from us, standing between two trees. It was a horrifying sight. Then they spoke. It was a woman's voice, and she said, "You kids shouldn't be in here." We just stood there and looked in silence at the figure of the apparent woman. But we both noticed she seemed to be getting bigger and closer very quickly, yet we didn't see the legs moving, or what we assumed were legs. And we heard no footstep sounds. JJ and I turned and ran. We ran and called the girls' names until we found them. Then they followed us out of the woods. We told them to just follow us to the car and run. At the car, we finally told them that some 7-foot-tall woman was in the woods. JJ said that if I hadn't seen it as well, he would have thought that he saw an apparition. The girls were freaked out, asking us to tell them that we were kidding. But we weren't. We watched from the car to see if anyone came out of the woods. No one ever did. The biggest question is, why would an older woman be in there at night alone? It's not like it was a nature trail. It was a fenced-off wooded area. Our school didn't have security back then either, so it wasn't that. The four of us went to go hang out at JJ's after, and I'll leave the rest of that night to your imagination. Now we're really fast-forwarding to that summer, when I was working at the school one final time as a summertime custodian, since I got a raise every summer that I'd return. There were about 4 of us in the building, 2 older custodians, and myself and another 18-year-old. I was in the center courtyard of the school mowing the grass, when I spotted someone at an upstairs window. It was an older woman. She looked like 65 maybe from the distance, with short curly hair, but her face was kind of blurred behind the glare of the window. I stopped mowing, looked at her, and waved. She didn't wave back. She didn't even move. I basically ran inside to where my boss was and asked who that woman upstairs was. He asked who. I told him to follow me. She was in one of the math classrooms. I led him to the upstairs math hallway. But to my surprise, all the classroom doors were closed and the lights were all off. The classroom it looked like she was in was empty. My boss told me there was no one else in the building and that I need to drink some coffee. He went back downstairs, so I did the same. I was genuinely freaked out. After I finished mowing, I started mopping the upstairs hallways and classrooms. Eventually, I was in the math hallway, and I would be mopping every last classroom floor up there, so I opened all the doors and turned on all the lights. I had my radio on the floor playing music as usual. Over the music, I heard a distinct woman's voice. It said, "Young man." It came from one of the classrooms. I couldn't tell which, but I turned off the music and started checking every nearby classroom, desperately hoping to find someone. Every single classroom was empty. I even checked behind the desks. The hairs on my arms were standing up. I felt a fight or flight response kick in. I bailed to the downstairs and told my boss once again someone's up there. I heard a voice now. He once again went up there with me, and I explained that I couldn't find anyone, but I saw and now heard a woman up here. When we didn't find anyone again, he told me to go home and take the day off and get some sleep. He thought I was crazy. I then put the two incidents together. What if they were connected? What if what JJ and I saw in the woods and what I saw and heard in that classroom are somehow related? When I came back to work the next day, I told my boss I just didn't want to work in the math hallway because I was freaked out. For the rest of the summer, I didn't go in that hallway again. Ever since then, I full-heartedly believe that my old high school is haunted by some spirit of an older woman. I have no other explanations.
Man, but it's pretty creepy, some of these stories. I mean, one thing I will say though also is that, like, I give Mr. Beast a lot of credit, but also give credit to people who submitted these stories too, because he's just reading off the story he got them from his email. But man, it'll be so in Japan. So I come from a Japanese background. There's a like a lore. I don't know the exact lore, but the lore is there's a hachishaka onna. Hachi means age. Shaku is a way of saying feet or foot. So the length of someone. Onna is woman. So 8 foot woman. And apparently, one of the lores in the lore, one of the ways to get rid of, if you see her, you're doomed to her death until you have to do this. Is basically you have to be in a room, and for a certain number, I think it's like night till day or something like that, and then you cannot let anybody else in. And they'll give you a little bit of food, a little bit of water, and because you can't leave, there's no bathroom. They have to give you a bucket or something. But it's kind of amazing how a lot of countries have some kind of similar tale, every once in a while. So, but yeah, so let's get to the next video.
This happened when I was 15, a sophomore in high school. Unfortunately, lunch classes were randomized, so this year I only had my friends Liam and Mike in that lunch period with me. A few months into the school year, one day this new kid walked in first period astronomy. Our teacher, who was a jokester, made him introduce himself to the class. His name was Craig. He teased Craig for a minute, then asked him to sit down. I sat in the back row, and the only open desk was next to me in the back corner. Craig came over and sat next to me. Class didn't technically start yet, so everyone was still chatting. As Craig sat down, he looked around the room, then I felt his stare shift to me. I turned and we made eye contact, and he nodded his head and said, "What's up?" I said, "Hey man, what's up?" He introduced himself, so I gave him my name as well. Craig was a white kid with very patchy, pubish-looking facial hair. He wasn't attractive, but he wasn't butt ugly. He just looked like a somewhat average guy. He was making small talk with me, and I was being nice because I could imagine how rough the first day at a new high school could be. I was probably the first person he officially met in the school. That period, we had to get into pairs for an assignment, so obviously Craig asked me to work with him. I had to say yes, why not? I didn't have any close friends in this class anyway. We had the laptop cart this period to begin work on the assignment, so we all had laptops. I could tell pretty quickly I didn't like Craig's sense of humor. He joked too much and was acting like we were good friends, but his jokes weren't normal, and he'd have this cringy laugh every time he made a joke. He cursed every other word, and he'd make constant dirty and vulgar jokes. I was no softy when it came to that, but it was just too much with him. By the end of the period, we had to exchange numbers for the project. Then it was on to my next class. Eventually came lunchtime. Mike didn't come to school for that day, so it was only Liam and I at our little circular lunch table. Suddenly I see Liam's eyes look up at someone behind me. Then someone pulls up a chair next to me, and I look and see Craig. He pats my shoulder and says, "What's up, buddy?" I kind of died a little inside. This meant he'd be sitting here every day now. I tried to be positive and give him a chance. Maybe he wasn't that bad. Liam tried being nice at first, but eventually, Craig started saying weird shit again, and Liam caught on that something was off, and he kept shooting me these knowing faces when Craig wasn't looking. That lunch period cemented the fact that something was off about Craig. I'm not judging anyone for being antisocial, but something about him seemed dark, like the awful things he'd say. It went beyond an antisocial personality. After school that day, since it was a Friday, I walked home and started texting my group chat about what we'd be doing later. On my walk home, I got a text from an unsaved number, and when I opened it, I realized it was Craig. He said, "Turn around." I did, and saw Craig running down the sidewalk towards me, waving. "Oh God," I said under my breath. I waited for him. When he caught up to me, he asked how far I lived from school. I said about a 10-minute walk, and he said same, and he said he'd walk with me. Then he asked if I wanted to work on the assignment real quick and bang it out over some beers. I told him I was actually going to be busy with my friends. He asked what I'd be doing. Uh-oh, he was trying to invite himself. I said we'd just be chilling at Liam's house, and he actually asked if it was cool he came. I didn't even know what to say. I came up with some BS, like Liam's mom doesn't let strangers in right away. It seemed to work. Craig kept walking with me, and I started wondering, is he following me all the way home? That's what he did. I got to my house and said, "All right, man, see you later," and gave him a little fist bump. He said, "See you later," and kept walking down the street. I noticed him look back, so I looked away. I texted my group chat about how weird he is, and Liam backed up what I was saying. We went about making plans to hang out at Liam's house for real, but not until like 9 o'clock. After an hour or two later, Craig texted me something disturbing. He said, "Yo, what's going on in front of your house? Why is there a cop car?" I replied, "What do you mean?" I rushed to go outside to the front stoop. There were no cop cars. It was just Craig standing in our driveway. He was laughing, and like a complete weirdo, he laughed and said, "I got you." Then he said, "I thought you were going to your friend Liam's place." I said, "Yeah, in a little bit." Then I said, "Why are you being weird?" He didn't laugh at that. I saw he was visibly offended. I said I gotta go inside, and so I did and shut the door. He texted me all offended saying, "Bro, WTF?" I was speechless. I just met this kid today. I spent 40 minutes with him. Why was he obsessing over me and following me and now stalking me? He literally tricked me into coming outside to see if I was home. I texted him back, "You're freaking me out, bro." I guess that was a mistake. He sent me some long message about how he thought I seemed chill and was different from the rest, but how I'm just like everyone else. I sent a screenshot to my friend group, and they were all laughing and shocked at the same time. I emailed my teacher and asked him if I could do the assignment myself and explain the situation. Then I left my house and walked to Liam's house just to get out. While I was at Liam's, Craig tried calling me. I just let it ring and ignored it. It was going to be an awkward day of class come Monday morning. Skipping ahead to when I got home around 11 or 12, my parents and sister were out. My parents might have been out with friends, and my sister may have been with her boyfriend, nothing unusual. I locked the door behind me and went up to my room. I started watching YouTube videos. I heard the back door ring. Yes, our house has a back doorbell. It had a different ring than the front doorbell. I hopped up and went downstairs, expecting to see my sister at the back door. But the lights in the backyard were off, and no one was on the other side of the door. I could see through the glass. I opened the main door, with the screen door still locked. I said hello, and I 100% heard the sound of someone's shoe scraping the concrete patio, just to the left, out of view from the door. I shut the door again and relocked it, and went back upstairs to call my dad, who didn't pick up. But just then, my phone started ringing again. It was Craig. I didn't pick up. He then texted me saying, "Come outside, shitbag." I replied, "I'm calling the police." And to my surprise, he replied, "Okay, okay, I'm leaving." It was him. He was hiding in the yard, waiting for me to come out. I sent the screenshot to my family and friends, and then to the school, who would reach out to his parents. Apparently, this was the exact reason the troubled family had to keep moving, because he would keep causing issues with people at every school he went to. I can only imagine the horrible things he's done to other people who didn't want to be his friend. He didn't show up to class on Monday, or ever again. If I had to guess, I think he once again transferred schools.
Yeah, man, you gotta be careful who you meet up. I'm not saying, of course, don't be judgmental to people, but at the same time, be open-minded as well. Just you never know who. Never know, they could be your next best friend for you. But at the same time, high school is just a weird time. My stepdad has a saying that he doesn't want to go. If he had a chance to be 18 again, he would never do that. Like go back in time. I can understand. I 50-50 agree with him. There are just some times that maybe like, just for the nostalgia, I guess. But I would not want to go back. When I was 18. So yeah, let's get to the last story.
I live in rural New Brunswick. It was early September, and it was my first day of school. I unfortunately was held back my senior year, so I'd be returning as a 19-year-old. I live in a rural area, so the middle school and high school was the same building, which also meant I knew most of the kids since it was a smaller school. When I got to school, I had study hall period A, which was the first period of the day. However, I noticed a new kid that I never met before on the other side of the room. I walked over to him and introduced myself. He introduced himself to me as Chester and that he just moved here. I showed him around the school and showed him where his next class is. As I was giving him a tour of the school, I noticed he seemed a bit off. As I was showing him around, he began to ask me questions. At first they seemed normal, like how long I've been at the school or where our classroom was, but then he asked me some questions that seemed more strange. One question he asked stood out the most. He asked for my address and snap. I was completely thrown off by this because I found it off to ask that. I ended up not giving him my address, but I thought why not to give him my snap. I gave him it and went on with my day. When the last period of the day came, I had English class. When I got to it, I noticed that there were only about 9 kids in the class. I was in the lowest level English class, so I wasn't expecting a lot of kids to be in my class. I took my seat, and that's when I looked 120 degrees behind me and saw that Chester kid eating a disgusting sandwich. He stared at me from the opposite side of the room and gestured for me to walk over to him. My English teacher, Mr. Bass, was about to start class, so I ignored his bullshit and went on with the class. 5 minutes later, I looked up from my book, and I noticed Chester again staring at me. This time he was more pissed off looking. Again, he gestured for me to walk over to him, and again, I continued reading my book. Then my phone pinged. It was a Snapchat message from Chester. He said, "Follow me." I replied, "I can't, we're in the middle of class." Next, I saw him get up from his table and ask Mr. Bass if he could go to the bathroom. He then walked out into the hall. I wanted to see why he wanted me to follow him, so 5 minutes later, I asked Mr. Bass if I could go to the bathroom as well. I then walked out into the hall. I didn't know where he went, so I looked down each hallway, and eventually I saw him. He was walking really slowly about 50 feet away. I stayed at a distance behind him so that he wouldn't know I was there. He then turned down a hallway in the school that wasn't really used for classes. It was more for storage, bathrooms, and offices. I then saw him open a door. He walked inside and shut the door behind him. I walked over to the door he walked in and recognized it to be the door that led to the school's basement. There was no way in hell I was going down there. I just casually went back to my class. When I got back, my phone pinged. It was him again. First he sent me a message saying, "Why didn't you enter the basement?" He then sent a picture of him eating a disgusting sandwich in the basement. He sent one more chat asking me to walk down into the basement.
I ain't doing
By
that.
now I was getting creeped out by the kid, so I replied asking him to leave me alone. I then removed and blocked him. When I got home, I immediately started on my homework. By the time I was done, it was about 11 p.m., and I was home alone. I was putting all of my homework away. Just then, my phone received a notification from Snapchat. Someone added me as a friend. It was from an account called "Why Didn't You Enter the Basement?" It It was him, so I blocked it. Then a couple minutes later, I got another request. This time the account was called "Why'd You Block Me?" I blocked that one, and then another one came. This one was even more ominous. It was called "I Know Where You Live," followed by "I'm right outside your house." Just then, I heard a window break downstairs. I immediately called the cops and told them what was happening. The operator said find a safe place to hide and lock the door. I then hung up and went into the hallway closet. I heard footsteps move from downstairs to upstairs. I cracked open the closet door and I saw him. At the end of the hallway in the dark, I saw Chester. It didn't seem like he knew that I noticed him until he turned his head to look at the closet, but it didn't seem like he knew I was inside. I didn't close the door, but I hid deeper in the closet. Chester then went over and opened the door. I was hiding behind a large container while he struggled to find the light. He eventually gave up and I heard his footsteps fade away downstairs. Seconds later, the police knocked on the door. I immediately opened it and told them what happened, but by the time they arrived, Chester was gone, and there was nobody on my property. They found out that he escaped through a window in my basement. I gave the police the accounts, and they said they'll do their best to trace them. The very next day of school, I went to the principal to report Chester, but the creepiest thing was what he told me. My principal said that there was nobody in the whole school named Chester. There were no records of him ever having been a student. I got chills. The camera footage was checked, and it turned out that he snuck in through a back entrance of the school and blended in with the other kids. I never saw him again at school, and I never heard from the police. But to this day, I still think about why he wanted me to go into the school basement. All I can say is that was probably the most dangerous person I'd ever met, and I don't know what his intentions were.
Not good, I'll tell you that for sure. I'm glad you didn't go into the basement. But yeah, so I'm thinking about telling you guys my story or like what my friend went through. I don't know. But yeah, guys, tell me what below in when I get finished with this video, what was like the scary moment for you in high school, or what did you like and not like about high school? Hope you guys enjoyed the video.